Yes.
That's the type of security that Egyptians are looking for. And that's, again, like I was saying earlier, as a private sector, we're trying to employ as many people as we can to create the job security, to help out on the other side of security. But the environment is not there. You can tell specifically a very major difference between the, pre-2011, post-2011, when people felt a certain sense of freedom, where you had creativity in music, creativity in poetry, creativity that started to come out on television. There were younger people on TV telling their poetry and telling their stories. Social media has been helping creativity majorly. So it wasn't just an environment, it was a sense of freedom that people needed. Then that was taken away from us for a whole year, where creativity died like it had never been dead in Egypt before, under the rule of these fascist terrorists.
Yes. After
the 30th of June, we are very prudent. We are still trying to get over the shock before we become too creative. We're afraid that this fantastic victory that we had on June 30th might be taken away one way or the other, especially with all the foreign pressure that's going on.
Yes.
We're confident that it won't. We're confident that we're going to come out on top, and we are going to move to the future as winners. But at the end of the day, it is the time that we really have to be very careful and work extremely hard. If we work 12 hours, this is the time we should be working 18 hours, maybe not sleep for a day or two, but this is the type of attitude that all Egyptians should have. You can no longer sit at home and be subsidized and be irresponsible for the number of children that you have, because you know that they will be educated for free, that they will eat for free, that they will have health care for free. Well, guess what? They're not being educated, and they're not getting any health care, and you're not happy. And this is the reality.
Yeah.
As you were talking about, the Prime Minister being an economist, Ahmed Galal is a fantastic economist. You've got great people sitting in that government. But the point is that they have to be very, very careful with the social aspect of approaching economic reform in Egypt. If it was up to a strict economist, a Milton Friedman type of thinker, then we would have gone through shock therapy, economic shock therapy, and we would have completely canceled subsidies. We know what needs to be done to put this on track. We know how to curb inflation. We know how to do this as economists. But there's a social aspect. There's 90 million people, 40% of them live under the poverty rate, which is $2 a day. There's an illiteracy rate of 48%. How do you deal with that as an economist, or as an Egyptian economist, or as a global economist? And here, as Egyptian economists, we understand that the social aspect of how we reform this economy and how it recovers is the most important part of it, because that's why we had a revolution. It was bread, freedom, and social justice. What revolution in the world asks for bread? The people of Egypt have revolted for bread. It happened in France, but at this point, we need to provide bread. We need to provide social dignity. This cannot be the Egypt that we look for in the future, that we are seeking simply a proper loaf of bread.
Yes.
We will give them basbousa, not bread.
Yes, instead of gâteau. Well, then that brings us to the minimum wages and what the cabinet has talked about setting a minimum wage for the government employees, workers, for 1,200 Egyptian pounds, equivalent to $175, which is very low. But then like for Egypt, compared to the basic salary of the minimum wage of employees, then this is fair. But some people do have their own take. They say that idea or that project was there since 2008, but then right now they're talking about it and it's going to be enacted in 2014. Then you know how many times the prices have gone high. Yes, with inflation. So what do you say on that?
Okay. We have to realize we are trying to solve a very old problem. This problem been there for over 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody around us, all our neighbors, they have a very annual increase, except us, almost. Well, we did increase, but very little. So we all of a sudden, because we have a revolution, we have to correct that. Of course, there are two sides for this equation. The worker, and of course, the one who paying the salary. both private sector and government. Okay? The government, they done it, completely political decision. They've been forced to do it. They want to please the people. They want to really decrease the pressure. I don't know how they're going to get the money. They're going to borrow it.
So that's the question, you know, we borrowed.
Yeah.
How much pressure would it put on our...
Now we're talking about the private sector, which would they postpone the decision a little bit. And I know the inside informations. Some of the businesses, like textile, textile business in the private sectors, they hire tens of thousands of workers. This business is barely surviving right now. Most of them, they're losing. They don't even make a profit. If you go tomorrow and increase from an average 600 or 700 pounds per month to 1,200 per month, this is like double. And if the payroll is equivalent, they are not making money, okay? So if the payroll is equivalent to practically more than 50% of their cost, they have serious trouble to go bankruptcy very quickly. So here we have a decision to make. To let this, we need to cut the unemployment. If we make unwise decision, we will increase the unemployment. Because simply the owner of this business will go bankruptcy and all these people will go home. So they don't reach 1,200 or nothing. So in the other hand, I'm very sympathized with the cost of living. 1,200 is the minimum that any human beings can afford to really pay for the demands of the life. So what we do? As I mentioned at the beginning, it is an old problem. You cannot solve the problem by touching the bottoms and at once resolve it. Take time. So all what we need is a little space, little time. It has to be done gradually. Maybe in 3 or 4 years. I am sympathized again 100% with the 1,200. As a matter of fact, you know, I feel they deserve more. I used to live abroad myself. When I came back, I could not imagine how any Egyptian family can survive for this place. I will go back to a story. I'm not going to mention the country. I used to be a manager in a big factory for this country, and I have to negotiate with the union to establish a salary for a new business we were creating in this country. So I sit with the union النقابة.
The syndicate there, okay, or the union, okay.
And the way we were discussing it, we were discussing all the cost of living for these workers. What is their children will cost, the school, even the vacation. A worker has to have a car.
Yeah.
And we put all of that. And we come to an income. And then we come to the business and we say, well, this is our competitor. This is the way it has to be done. This is the business way. Okay? And in the end, we negotiate to make sure we can survive as a business people and they will be happy. If we can come to these equations, everybody's happy. So it is a win-win situation. You cannot keep playing the games. This private sectors has really sucked the blood of the worker for so many years, and they will go out of business. It has to be done gradually. But, you know, I agree, I sympathized, the minimum rate, it has to be done. The additional thing is, which I talk about, the social justice. Any graduate young person, we should have in the budgets, if he cannot get a job, the government has to pay unemployment fees. This has to be done in Egypt very soon, maybe for 1 year. I'm not talking about forever.
Yeah.
And again, for a transition period until we develop all the system, all the environment, and resolve this equation.
Mr. Nagib, what do you say on that?
Considering the minimum wage, I think that is a basic human right in any civilized nation or economy, that everybody should have a minimum wage based on the environment that we live in and the living conditions that we're in. There is no doubt. Whether it's public sector or whether it's private sector. But I completely agree, this is not the time to enforce private sector minimum wage. I think we're doing fine as the private sector. Just let us do what we need to do. Don't put any extra regulations on us. On the contrary, we need you to ease up a little bit on what we're doing.
Yeah.
On the other side, with minimum wage for the public sector, my opinion on this, despite the fact that it is required, but the public sector, there's a major waste of money that goes into salaries. Now we're paying a minimum wage for people that do not produce. And that is a much bigger problem than the minimum wage that we're talking about.
They're doing nothing.
Exactly. So my problem now is how to get minimum wage to a bunch of people that don't produce anything for the country. And I'm going to borrow money to do that, or have been borrowing money to do that. There are some ministries, without mentioning their names, that their whole budget of about 180 million Egyptian pounds is directed strictly to salaries. So what do they spend on the function of the ministry itself? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So I think even if we're going to look at minimum wage for the private sector, it should be a much higher minimum wage than the public sector. We need to start getting people from universities to the private sector rather than to the government, as we have been doing. The government employs a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's not a productive government. It needs to start taking advantage of the private sector and working with them on trying to migrate some of that. I'm not saying privatization of government entities. I'm saying the migration of workers from a lower minimum wage in the public sector to a higher minimum wage in the private sector. My last comment on that, the concept of a maximum wage, that I have a problem with, especially in the private sector. You want to do it on the government sector, you will not be able to attract the type of people that you need.
They will not apply it in the private sector.
And they cannot apply it in the private sector. It just doesn't make sense. And I think they should be very careful on how they apply it in the public sector, because some public sector employees, you cannot put a maximum wage on a chairman of a bank that brings in billions of dollars the same way that you would put on somebody that's running a metro station. So we have to be very, very careful on how we balance that, because social justice isn't just for the poor. It's also for the people that work hard. It's not a bad thing to be a businessman that works hard, that makes money. That is not a bad thing.
By the way, the government workers right now is 25% of the total workers, so 75% for the private sector.
Well, unfortunately, on that note, we just come to the end. We wrap up our edition today, and I'd like to thank Ashraf Nagib, economic expert, for being here with us, as well as Dr. Hassan Shafai, economic expert, also for being here with us on our show. As for our viewers, thank you for being there. We'll see you again next week. I'm Nazim, signing off and wishing you all the best. And I always say, God bless Egypt. Bye for now.